Hello, what's up, guys? Good morning. Hopefully, you all had a good day yesterday. So obviously, today is the 22nd of May 2025. Now, obviously, today is the anniversary of the Manchester suicide bombing. Obviously, everyone will know that sadly, 8 years ago today, um, a bomb was detonated in the city room at the Manchester Arena at the end of a Ariana Grande concert, obviously, which resulted in 22 people losing their lives and dozens more, unfortunately, being injured. Um, on that horrible night on the 22nd of May 2017. And before I go any further, I want to send my thoughts, my prayers out to the families of all of those who were killed that night. I also want to send my thoughts, my prayers out to anyone that was there that night. You know, and is still dealing. Because I imagine some people probably still dealing with like the effects of what happened. Even now. It's so crazy to think it's been 8 years since the Manchester attack. It doesn't feel like it's been that long. You know, it's hard not to get angry or emotional talking about this. Like, whenever I talk about things like this, I always get so angry and emotional. And this in particular hits me more than anything because, those we all know that those people that died that night, and we all know they were let down. You know, I do feel for them in the fact that they were so badly let down that night. I feel for the people that went to that concert, having the night of their lives, and what was supposed to be the best night of their lives turned into, very quickly turned into the worst night of their lives and turned into, a night of fun, happiness, and good times turned into a night of terror, heartbreak, tragedy, and just devastation. Sheer devastation. This, I always, this terrorist incident in particular was probably the worst one we've had since London 7/7. The fact that kids were obviously, the targets, obviously, this was an attack that targeted, parents and their kids as they were leaving the concert, it was kind of at the end of the concert around 10:30 p.m. that the bomb was detonated. Whenever I look at that night, I still don't know how the attacker, I'm not even going to say his name because I can't even I can't even bring myself to say his name. Um, but I still look at that. Whenever I look at that, I think, how on earth did he even get into the sitting room with that device? Obviously he walked past two security guards. They walked past him going in the opposite direction. Surely they would have noticed something was a bit odd the way that he was struggling to walk under the weight of that rucksack. And that's the thing you can see, like the way that he was walking, he was sort of half hunched over, like he was struggling to walk under the weight of the rucksack because the rucksack was so heavy. And if I see someone like that that's walking along like that, they've got a huge, big rucksack on, and they're actually struggling to walk under the weight of it, that's going to raise some, alarm bells for me. I'm going to think, no, okay, something's not right there. And the fact that he was dressed in all black, carrying a large black rucksack, of course, when you see someone like that, you're going to think suicide bomber or something like that. That's the first thing that's going to come to your mind. I remember I was thinking about the security guard the other day, Kyle Lawler. Now, he was approached by a member of the public. He was in the foyer, he was in the sitting room, and they approached him and told him about Salman the baby, and obviously mentioned it. He was there. and he looked like, he looked like a suicide bomber, I think a lot of people probably would have thought that because of the way that he was dressed and the fact that he was carrying a large rucksack, which obviously, bats like that are not actually allowed in the city, like not allowed in, not allowed anywhere in the arena, but obviously, um, it's just, it's just horrible, really horrible to think about, what people went through that night. The one family that I often think about a lot is the family of Safi. Safi Rose Roussos, the 8-year-old girl that died. The fact, she was the youngest victim of that attack. They lost their child. They had their child taken from them in the worst possible way and the most unimaginable way. They would, you know, her mum and her mum and obviously Safi, her mum went to that concert. They were having a night of their lives, and then that happens. It's just, horrible thinking about the young lives that were lost. And yeah, it's sad that the grown-ups lost it. The adults, about the adults who died in the attack, but it's worse knowing that there were like young teenagers who died in that attack as well. Like, obviously, you had Olivia who was obviously 15, Nell Jones, I think, was 14, Georgina Hannida was 18, Safi was 8, obviously, the youngest victim of the attack. You had a few others like Sarah Lachowski, she was, I think, 14, I think, as well, 14, 15. It's just obviously Megan Hurley as well. She was 15, I think about 15, and allowed 16, I think 15 or 16. Um, just thinking about that. Obviously I don't know anyone. I don't personally know anyone who was there, but I still feel for the families. I still feel for the people that were there. I feel for the people that lost their lives. That anger because of the fact that those people were so badly let down. I still feel that anger, knowing that so many mistakes were made that night. It's that anger of knowing that attack would have been prevented. That evil lowlife should never have been able to carry out that attack. And it's just like it is just like absolutely terrible. And as I said, I feel for the security guard because obviously he was approached by obviously this member of the public, but he was too scared. He actually said that he didn't approach the suicide bomber because he was too scared. Because he was so scared of getting it wrong and being branded a racist. And I actually feel like that. I actually think that's kind of sad. The fact that he was too scared to like approach the bomber because obviously he was so scared of getting it wrong and being branded a racist. Like, I can't, that's unbelievable. I mean, to me, in a way, that kind of feels like a bit of an excuse. But there you go. You know, um, it's like whenever you go back and you watch videos, like and you watch the moment, you hear the moment that the bomb explodes. It's just so haunting. Because obviously you know that like that was the moment that a lot of people died. The moment that that moment of horror, that moment of devastation. So many innocent lives. It's sad to think that so many innocent people lost their lives that night. It's sad to think that those people were so badly let down. I mean, obviously those people aren't going, who made those mistakes aren't turn back the time and fix the mistakes they made. They've got to live with that for the rest of their lives. You know, those people who had a chance to stop it, had a chance to prevent that attack from happening, are always going to be haunted by the fact that they didn't stop that from happening. It saddens me to think that the youngest victim of that attack was just 8 years old. Like, that's the saddest thing about this. An 8-year-old girl died in that attack. Like, it doesn't get any more tragic than that. It really does. I mean, I feel for her family because they obviously would have, I think they were under the impression that Safia died pretty much instantly from her injuries, but then obviously they found out that she was actually alive for a while after the bomb exploded. And and obviously they found out that Safia had also been saved had she received more, like, better medical treatment and more adequate medical treatment. She had been saved. And I think they said the same for 26-year-old John Atkinson as well. I think they said that they were saying that he had been saved as well. And that's even worse, knowing that there were at least two people who could have been saved and who might have survived their injuries had they received better medical treatment, or more adequate medical treatment. It's just unbelievable. There's one story that always, I remember quite fondly with this incident. Now, there was a mother who was there, a woman who was there with her daughter and her friend, and they were sat next to a woman that night. And they said that the woman was acting really kind of strangely all night. They said that she was like, she kept fidgeting, she kept playing with the zips on her bag, on her coat. They said that every so often she was looking back in the direction of the city room where the bomb exploded and smirking to herself. And obviously, the mum became concerned about her behaviour, the woman's behaviour. She went and spoke to security and to security guards, and they said that they would like watch it, like keep an eye on her from a discreet distance. The mother went and sat back down. A little while later, the daughter got up and she went and spoke to the security guards, and they said to her basically, they said to her something along the lines of, "How would you feel if someone was making accusations like that against you?" You know, that was basically what, in a roundabout ways, what they said. Now, what the mother and the daughter said was that the woman vanished, not like she disappeared off somewhere not long before the bomb went off. And I think they just assumed that she'd gone to the loo. Like, I think that they were under the impression that she'd just gone to the loo. But I don't know, it just seems odd to me that, they said that she was fidgeting all night, playing with the zips on her bag and everything. But the sheer fact that she kept, but it's the one thing that stands out is the fact that she kept looking back in the direction of the foyer where the bomb exploded and she was smirking to herself, and then she disappeared off somewhere not long before that at the bottom, just not long before the bomb was detonated. Like, she happened to, disappear off, only, just not long before that bomb exploded in the city. I'm not saying that this woman had anything to do with what happened, but I do think it's a little bit odd, the fact that she kept kind of looking back in the direction of the city room and smirking to herself, and then she's disappeared off somewhere not long before the bomb actually exploded. I mean, they've never actually said that Samuel, who I nearly said his name then, he who shall not be named, was obviously right on his own that night. Obviously, there was no accomplice with him that night. But do we know for sure that there wasn't an accomplice? I don't know. You know, to be honest with you, I don't think I would, if I ever had to go to a concert at the Manchester Arena, I think, I don't think I'd ever be able to step foot in that foyer. I think it'd be too haunting for me stepping foot into that foyer, knowing that 7 years ago so many people died in that spot. Like, so many people, 22 people lost their lives. I mean, it must be haunting for those that do step, that obviously were right in, who were at Manchester Arena, and you know, I can't imagine what it must have been like for the emergency service, like the police and the people that you know they obviously the sights they would have seen that night. Seeing all of those people laying there seriously injured, some already dead. Some had obviously been healed instantly. Um, like it's I still, even now, I feel myself getting so angry and so emotional talking about this. Like, even 8 years on, I still feel so angry for those people because they were so badly let down that night. You know, it, I mean, obviously, if you look at the bomber, you could tell he was a suicide bomber. Um, it's obviously the style, the clothing and everything that he was wearing was classic suicide bomber. Dressed in all black. You dress like that at a concert. You know, and someone did say to him like, what are you doing? Like, and he said to them, he told and the bomber had told this person that he was waiting for someone to come out at the concert. Obviously, he wasn't. We all know what he was really doing there. You know, like how, I mean, so, the fact that so many stupid mistakes were made that night, you know, it's just sad. Like, I feel for every single one of the families, and every single one of, all of the people that were there because, this day is always going to be a painful reminder for them of what happened, the fact that their loved one went to a concert and never came home. And like, you would never think your loved one would was going to go to a concert and not come home. You know, I know that I was reading about Olivia's mum, dad, not Olivia's, and his dad. Obviously, Olivia obviously was getting ready to leave that night, and the mum had said to her, make sure that you leave as the last one's playing, so that you're not waiting for trams for hours. And she went, and Olivia said to her mum, "Yeah, hey mum, I know what I'm doing, you know, I love you," and that was it. She went out the door. And Olivia's mum not knowing that that was the last time she was ever going to see her daughter alive, and that, you know, you think about it, right? Olivia's mum and dad, and obviously Nell's parents, and, Georgina's parents, they would never have thought, known that their child was going to go to a concert that night and not come home again. No one would have ever known that, even Safi's parents wouldn't have known that was, what was going to happen that night. No one could have predicted, I don't think anybody could have predicted what was going to happen that night. Um, I mean, obviously things were still, were pretty bad in the UK, because obviously we'd had, just only 2 months before that, we'd had the terrorist attack at Westminster, and then we had that attack, obviously we had the suicide bombing at the arena, and then just only about 2 or 3 weeks after that, we had we had the terrorist attack on London Bridge. And then obviously about a week or two, I think about a week or so after about a week or two after the London Bridge attack, we had the Grenfell Tower fire. So it was all going on that year, wasn't it, in 2017? But Manchester Arena, I think everyone would say that the Manchester Arena bombing was the worst. I seen a video online. It's like dash cam footage, and you see like the light, like the light of the bombing, and you hear the boom. Like, it's just unbelievable. You know, that sound. You know, it's so haunting whenever every time you go back and watch it, and you hear the moment that bomb explodes. It's just so haunting. I can't imagine what it must have been. Like what it must have been like for the people that were there. I know there was a couple there, and they was there with their 8-year-old daughter, I think her name was Lily. Um, But the little girl got hit by shrapnel and she was quite badly hurt. And her parents were trying to flag down an ambulance and it wouldn't get one. And a policewoman came across them. And she actually took them to the hospital. Put them in the back of the police van and she took them to the hospital. Um, and I actually think that was really, that was pretty heroic, you know. And I was also reading about the homeless guy that obviously after he heard the explosion, he actually ran into the foyer. And I know there was the guy, obviously the homeless guy that obviously went up into the foyer and he was robbing basically all the dead bodies and all that, stealing people's phones and wallets, which was, you know, incredibly disgusting and just downright shameful, you know, to do something like that. You know, that makes the gravity of the situation worse is the fact that that just happened and a homeless person ultimately sees that opportunity to rob people and to steal people's mobile phones and wallets as these people were laying dead on the floor. Like how does that guy live with himself knowing that he did that, knowing that you know that had just happened and he went up into the foyer and was robbing people. Like it just doesn't bear thinking about. But you also praised the other homeless guy that went up there and he was actually, instead of running away from the arena, he ran into the foyer and he was trying to help, people that, help whoever he could. And he had an 8-year-old girl, Safi, in his arms. Um, Obviously they were saying that when Safi was in the ambulance, she was asking, am I gonna die? Now, an 8-year-old child should never have to say those words like, am I gonna die? Am I going to die? Like, it's just it's like heartbreaking. Like knowing what people went through that night, like I can't imagine what it must have been like what it must have felt like. How scared people must have felt that night. And obviously, 1 minute you're having a great time, you're loving life, you're in the best mood ever, having fun, having a night of your lives, and then the next minute you're fleeing from the arena in sheer terror because a bomb's just gone off. You know, 1 minute, it's sad how, things very quickly turn from one of the best nights of, so many people's lives to a night that people want to forget. It's a night that people will never forget. It's not a night that anyone will ever forget. You know, it's a night that as I said, it's a night that people will always remember, but it's a night that people will always remember for the wrong reasons, because of what happened that night. What happened that night is gonna live with people forever, those people, whatever, and this goes without saying, the people who died that night, the people whose lives were taken that night, they will never be forgotten. They will always, always be remembered by all of us. Another thing that really impressed me was how the people of Manchester came together in the aftermath of the Manchester attack to show that defiant that how their defiance against terrorism and show that these terrorists were never gonna win no matter how hard they tried to do that they were never gonna win. You know, I think seeing all of the people of Manchester come together the way they did was just truly remarkable. And that's what you love to see, like in the aftermath, of a huge tragedy like that. You love to see people coming together, and the people of Manchester certainly did that. In the aftermath of that attack, the people of Manchester certainly did come together, and it was lovely to see that. It was lovely to see the way that all of the people of Manchester came together to show that these terrorists were never going to win, and they were never going to, to show that level of defiance. It's that one thing that you love to see. And it kind of makes that situation for a little bit better when you see all of these people, you seeing all of these people coming together. And especially the way that the people of Manchester did in the aftermath of obviously the Manchester Arena bomb. I mean, obviously, it must have been hard for the people, for the day, for a few days after people. There were certain people who didn't know whether their loved ones were dead or alive. I mean, I remember Olivia's parents. They were coming on, begging people if they saw Olivia to contact them and let them know that she was okay, that she was safe. That's all they wanted to know. Was that all they wanted to know was that Olivia was okay, she was safe. Unfortunately, they got the phone call that no parent should ever have to get. They got the worst news they got the news they should never have had to get. I mean, obviously, my thoughts are always going to be with those people, with the people that were affected by Manchester, and by the families of the victims, especially on a day like today, with it being the anniversary. Um, it's hard to talk about things like this. It's hard to it hits hard when you talk about things like this. It's so like such a painful thing to talk about. I mean, obviously, as I said, I don't know anyone who was there personally, but I still feel for everyone who was there. I still feel for the people who lost their lives. I still feel, I still think it's devastating. An 8-year-old child. The youngest victim of that attack was It was 8 fucking years old. She lost her life in the worst possible way. She had her life taken from her like that on the night where she was supposed to be the best night of her life. She had her life taken by some vile use for a human being. And, you know, I hope that we never see, anything like that again. And I don't think we ever will, because obviously security now is much better than it was then, you know. But I think I'll always question how the fuck he got into the arena with that bomb. Like, how did no one stop him? Surely they must have been a bit concerned the way that he was struggling to walk onto the way that rucksack. That would have raised some serious alarm bells for me. But yeah, my thoughts are with the today with the families of those who died, and also the people that were there that night. You know, my thoughts go out to every single one of you today. You know, and One Love Manchester made a 22 people who died. Rest in peace, and God bless them. And we will never forget. We will remember. We will always remember. We will remember them forever. And I guarantee that. Those 22 wonderful, some wonderful people will be remembered forever. Their lives will never be forgotten. They as people will never be forgotten. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you for another one later on. Have a good day. Bye bye.